Welcome back, and welcome once again to our guest, Colonel John Mills, United States Army retired, former special operator with expertise, among other things, in psychological warfare, also cyber warfare. Worked in the Office of the Secretary of Defense as a civilian with responsibility for some of those matters as well. John, we were talking earlier a little bit about Ukraine as a distraction. And there's no question, I think, that the Chinese view it as that and are helping the Russians in part to keep the attention off of what they are doing or have in mind doing, among other places, in another island in the South Pacific or Western Pacific, at least Taiwan. But having said all that, John, there is a horrific thing taking place at the moment in Ukraine, and that is a level of destruction we have not seen on the continent of Europe, arguably since, well, World War II. We're watching, it seems worse yet, a determination now on the part of Putin, having taken the measure of the West and having calculated, how much help he can get from the not just the Chinese but the Indians and perhaps others, that he can get away with the wholesale destruction of Ukraine, much as he has now destroyed Mariupol, one of its most beautiful port cities. Tell us where you see things standing right now, John, especially the possibility that weapons of mass destruction might actually be in the kit he uses for these purposes. And what are the stakes?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. We have to put this in strategic context of the agreement between Xi and Putin. And Putin's promise was to deliver the Ukraine in 72 hours. 6 weeks later, obviously, that has not worked out well. We have to be crystal clear on this, and there is some muddled thinking that we have to address, and everybody needs to wake up out of their muddled thinking. Um, Putin, yes, maybe exposing corruption. Yeah, maybe exposing questionable biological sites, might be uncovering the Biden Hunter corruption in the Ukraine, which is real and does exist. Putin is not our friend. Putin is a client and a subcontractor of Xi. He is waging massive destruction now in the Ukraine since he failed to deliver the Ukraine in his promise of 72 hours. It's been a total belly flop, and therefore he has resorted to what the Russians, Soviets, Tsars know best, which is wholesale slaughter and destruction. So this is not a military operation. This is just a violent, demonic attempt to just destroy violently a country, and we need to provide the appropriate support because the Ukrainians have a national identity and they want to fight. Let them fight and let's give them the equipment. Now, we have to be careful about this because once this spigot is turned on, as you know and remember, Frank, sometimes bad things happen when we want to turn the spigot on, but in the right way. That means javelin, 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 the anti-tank missile. That means Stinger, or we do have stocks of the Russian equivalent, SA-14, SA-16. Give them those, but give it to them at the border. No special operation training teams. This is where the slippery slope comes in. No American sets foot on the terrain other than our existing embassy staff and related to the embassy staff. And because the Ukrainians want to fight, as opposed to South Vietnam. I love the South Vietnamese. As opposed to Iraq, some of these other places that Afghanistan, they don't have a national identity. They don't want to fight. They're very happy to watch us spend our blood and treasure and fight and waste resources. The Ukrainians want to fight. They have a strong feeling. Javelins, Stingers at the border, and let's
They've lived under the Russian misrule in the past, as you say, the Soviet misrule as well, and so they want no part of it. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to support that. Let me ask you, John, something I mentioned in a commentary today is that the Russians have also, it seems to me, another um, weakness that we ought to be, well, bringing as much pressure to bear on as we can. And that is that whether it's Xi or whether it is the Indians or whether it is as perhaps in prospect now Saudi Arabia or others, may be willing to do business with the Russians, more or less on business as usual terms. And that a point that could be greatly intensified, it seems to me, is if one does that, you are not just emboldening the Russians or maybe even empowering them, you are actually accomplices to the criminal activity that is now afoot, the war crimes. And again, some like Xi may feel that's not that much of a burden, but I have the feeling that we could make it painful to him, and not least if we stop underwriting his operations as a partial response, among other things, to this kind of behavior. John, I did want to hit one other thing before we run out of time. The government of the United States is actively working with the Russians, as it happens, in order to get their help, we're told, in negotiating an agreement with Iran, which at this point seems to be the ultimate, Pyrrhic exercise, one in which we will watch money flowing, terrorists being removed from terrorist designation lists, and other opportunities for the government of Iran to be back in business fully, selling oil and engaging in terrorism, for that matter. All of this seems absolutely mad, and I just wonder, as a very experienced national security professional, who has worked, by the way, during the Obama years with some of these same characters. Talk a little bit about the policies and the prospects of this behavior with respect to Iran.
Well, this fanatical religious idolatry of a deal with Iran is just unexplainable. Other than Jake Juicebox Sullivan needs to resign. His only experience to date has been destroying Syria, destroying Libya, and oh, by the way, trying to cut the original deal with Iran, and then teaching at Yale. So I guess he's very experienced to cause chaos as the national security advisor.
Now, this was one of the adults that we were promised was going to be brought back to Washington to restore professionalism to national security policy.
Yeah, man-child Jake Juicebox Sullivan has no credibility. Nobody respects him. Is a total disaster. All he does is tee-hee about this or that. When the Russians lose their cruiser and goes tee-hee, isn't that funny? He doesn't realize we're dealing with a nation that has nuclear weapons and doesn't appreciate it, where one of their largest warships gets sunk. And these are not these are very complex operations that potentially have many fingers and countries involved. So Juicebox Sullivan is a threat to our national security. And oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, was also spying on a candidate. And was also running the Hillary Clinton, spying campaign. So I think Durham
and promoting this whole Russia hoax business as well.
He may be very well on the hit list for Mr. Durham. So this is extremely dangerous. And this just obsession with giving away the farm to Iran it's really Valerie Jarrett, and who's really pulling has her hand somewhere up Jake Sullivan, moving his mouth, because it makes no intellectual sense. But I guess that's what they teach at Yale.
We have to leave it at that, John. An important point to which we will return with you, I hope, next week. Thank you very much for your time today and your service to our country. God bless you, my friend.